Okay, picture this. That rush you get, you know that feeling when something amazing happens in a game.
Uh-huh.
It could be like a last-second goal or like an insane dunk or, just some incredible feat of athleticism that makes you jump out of your seat.
Yeah, totally.
Like you've probably felt it, right?
Yeah.
That's the power of
Yeah,
sports.
exactly. That shared passion.
And you know what? That's such a great way to connect with people from all over.
Oh, yeah.
So today we're going to dive deep into how you can do that, how you can connect with people through talking about sports in English.
I think what's really fascinating is that this love of sports, it's everywhere.
It really is.
It transcends languages and cultures, like everyone gets it.
For sure.
We've got some really cool stuff in front of us, some material that's been put together specifically for English learners. But honestly, even if you consider yourself pretty fluent, I think it can be really helpful to just take a step back and think about how we talk about this passion for sports.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're aiming to do today. It's to give you, our listener, the tools you need, those key phrases, essential vocab, even some grammar tips, so you can confidently talk about your favorite teams, players, and those unforgettable moments, all in English.
And just to zoom out for a second, think about how often sports come up in conversations in general.
All the time. Right.
It's such a natural icebreaker, a way to kind of find that common ground with people you've just met, or even a way to just connect with folks from totally different backgrounds.
Definitely.
And for anyone learning English, it's a goldmine.
Yeah.
You're going to pick up so much vocab: goal, score, team, championship. These words are just thrown around all the time in sports conversation.
We really are. And it's not just about like memorizing words, it's also about, practicing different tenses.
Right.
Because you're going to use the past tense to talk about a game that already happened.
Yeah.
Or the present tense if you're talking about a league that's currently in play.
Absolutely.
Or if you're talking about like your habits.
Right.
Like maybe you always watch games on the weekends.
Yeah.
So imagine you're at a party, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you meet someone new and they ask you, do you follow any sports?
Yeah.
You could say, yes, I'm a huge fan of basketball. My favorite team is.
Boom.
And just like that, you've started a conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. It's such an easy way to get things going. And that brings us to a good point. Like, where do you even begin when you want to talk about sports with someone?
Yeah.
Our source material here, it really emphasizes starting simple.
Yeah.
Just easy questions, really basic ways to share those initial thoughts, and you're off to the races.
Exactly. So you could ask something like, do you like sports?
Yeah.
Or what's your favorite sport?
Mhm.
Or to find out if they play any sports themselves, you could ask, do you play any games?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's always, who's your favorite player?
Classic.
Yeah, that's an easy one. And if you want to share your own thoughts right off the bat, you could just say, I really enjoy basketball, or my favorite sport to watch is tennis. Maybe, you have a specific routine, like I often watch soccer on the weekends.
Totally.
Or maybe there's a player you just love.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say something like, I think Cristiano Ronaldo is phenomenal.
Yeah, that always gets people talking.
It does. Right.
Yeah.
And just to give you a sense of how this might sound in a real conversation, we have an example here. So imagine you say, hi, do you like sports?
Mm-hmm.
And your friend says, yes, I do. I love basketball. What about you?
Okay.
And you can be like, cool. I like soccer the most. Do you have a favorite team?
Right.
And they're like, yeah, I support the Los Angeles Lakers. And you?
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, I'm a huge fan of Real Madrid. See, just a few simple questions and you're already finding common ground.
What's cool about that is you've instantly created a connection just from finding something you both enjoy. It shows how powerful sports can be, in bringing people together.
Yeah.
So, okay, you've made that initial connection, you've established this shared interest. Now, how do you actually go deeper and talk about the sports you really love?
So you found out that this person also enjoys sports, and now it's time to really dig into your favorite.
Uh-huh.
And the material suggests a really clear way to do this.
Okay.
First, you name the sport,
Right.
then you explain why you like it.
Okay.
And third, you give a little bit of detail about how the game is played.
So essentially, you're outlining the sport itself, explaining why you're drawn to it, and then giving a little insight into the rules and how it's played.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense.
So for example, you could say, my favorite sport is Formula One racing. I find it so exciting because of the incredible speed and the strategic pit stops. It's a sport where drivers compete in these super fast cars on a track, and the races are often decided by tiny margins.
Yeah, you've really given them a picture of what it's all about.
Right. It's informative, it's simple.
Absolutely. And to help you add those details to your descriptions, there's some really useful vocab that's good to have in your back pocket.
Yeah, for sure.
We're talking about words like team, as in, which team do you support?
Right.
Or player, like that player made an amazing save.
Yeah.
Then you've got match or game, like, did you see last night's game? And of course you have score, like what was the final score?
Of course, yeah.
And then the very crucial win and lose, like, it was a tough match, but we won in the end.
Yeah, those are like the essentials.
They are. These are the building blocks for any sports conversation.
Right, those are your foundation.
Exactly. And the source gives us some pretty good examples for putting these words into practice.
Okay.
For soccer, it suggests something like, I love soccer because it's so fluid and unpredictable. Two teams try to score by getting the ball into the other team's net using their feet, head, or chest. The moments leading up to a goal are always so tense. It's like you can feel that tension building just from that description.
I know, right? And for basketball, they say, basketball is my favorite.
Yeah.
It's such a dynamic game where two teams try to score points by shooting a ball through a hoop. The constant back and forth and the athleticism of the players are what I enjoy most.
Right, and notice how they've included not just those basic rules, but also what personally draws them to the sport.
Yeah, what makes it exciting for them.
Exactly. And then for tennis, they have, I really enjoy both playing and watching tennis. It's a sport where two players hit a ball over a net, and they're trying to make it difficult for their opponent to return it.
Right.
I really like that combination of mental strategy and physical endurance. So it's not just about power, there's a whole mental game involved.
Yeah. So these are great examples, to give you a starting point for describing your own favorite sport.
They are. And what's really neat is that even with just these short descriptions, you get a real sense of what makes each sport unique and why someone might be so passionate about it. So we've talked about the overall sports, but how do we bring individual athletes into the conversation?
That's where things get really fun.
I know. Talking about your favorite players, there's just something so engaging about it.
Yeah, because you get to share your own personal enthusiasm.
Totally. And the way they break it down in the material is super helpful.
Okay.
So first you name the player. Then you say what sport they play.
Okay.
Then you explain why you admire them. And then, this is the fun part, you throw in a little fun fact about them to make it even more interesting.
Oh, yeah.
That fun fact is a great way to add that extra layer, to spark more conversation.
Definitely. So, for example, you could say, my favorite athlete is Simone Biles.
Okay.
She's a gymnast.
Right.
I admire her incredible skill and mental strength. And, for fun fact, she holds more world championship medals than any other gymnast in history.
Wow, that's a great one.
Right. It's concise and it's engaging.
It is. And there are some handy phrases you can use when you're talking about athletes you admire.
Yeah, for sure.
You could say, he's considered the best in the world at us. Or, she's particularly famous for. And then to express your admiration, you could say, what I admire most about him is. Or, her technique is just phenomenal.
And they actually give some really great examples for well-known players.
Oh, perfect.
So for soccer, they have, my favorite player is Kylian Mbappe. He plays for France.
Okay.
I love watching him because he's so fast and his finishing is incredible.
Right.
And he even scored a hat trick in a World Cup final.
Wow.
Right. Talk about impressive.
Yeah, that's a big one. Okay, what about basketball?
For basketball, they've got, I'm a huge fan of LeBron James.
Oh, classic.
He plays for the Los Angeles Lakers. I admire his longevity and his all-around game. It's amazing that he's still playing at such a high level after so many years in the NBA.
It's incredible, really.
It is. And then for tennis, they say, my favorite tennis player is Novak Djokovic.
Okay.
He's from Serbia. I admire his mental toughness and his incredible consistency.
Right.
He actually holds the record for the most Grand Slam singles titles in men's tennis.
Wow.
So those examples really illustrate how to use that structure and those phrases.
They do. And what I find really interesting is that the reasons people give for admiring certain players, it often tells you a lot about what they value. Like whether it's pure skill or perseverance or mental strength.
Yeah.
It gives you a glimpse into their own personal values, which is cool.
It is.
So we've covered the basics of starting a conversation, talking about your favorite sports, and even your favorite athletes. What's the next step in making these conversations even more dynamic?
Okay, now we're getting into storytelling.
Oh, yes.
Talking about those memorable moments.
The highlights, the nail biters, the ones you'll never forget.
Exactly. This is where you can really bring the excitement of sports to life in your conversations.
And it's about reliving those moments, sharing that excitement with other people, you know, creating a connection through a memory, even if they weren't there to see it themselves.
Yeah. And the key here is using the past tense to describe what happened and really conveying those emotions you felt.
That's what makes those stories stick, that emotional element.
Right. It's all about how you felt in that moment.
Absolutely. And the material provides a really useful structure for sharing those moments.
Okay.
First, you set the scene, tell the person where you were, what the context was.
Okay.
Second, you describe the key action.
Right. The main event.
Like what actually happened that made it so memorable. And then finally, you share your feelings, like how you felt in that moment.
Exactly. And to help you tell those stories, here are some key past tense words to keep in mind.
Right.
We've got won, as in my team won in the final seconds.
Yeah.
He scored an unbelievable goal from midfield.
Love it.
They played their hearts out. And of course, lost. We lost. But it was an amazing game.
Right. It's not always about winning. Sometimes it's about that incredible effort.
Totally. So those past tense verbs, they're essential for telling these stories.
They are the backbone of any sports narrative.
Yeah, and they give some good examples here too.
Okay.
So for soccer, they have, I'll never forget, the 2018 World Cup final between France and Croatia. I was watching with a bunch of friends, and when France scored their fourth goal, the entire room erupted.
I can imagine.
Right. It was just the most amazing atmosphere.
I can almost picture it. The energy, the excitement.
I know. And then for basketball, there was this one game where my favorite player hit a three-pointer at the buzzer.
Oh, yeah.
I was watching at home, and I literally jumped off the couch.
I've done that.
Right. It gets you going. My heart was pounding.
Those last-second shots, they get your adrenaline pumping.
For sure. And then for tennis, they say, last year at Wimbledon, there was this incredible comeback in the women's singles final. The player was down 2-0, but she fought back to win in 5 sets.
Wow, what a match.
Right.
Yeah.
I was on the edge of my seat the whole time.
You must have been so nervous.
I was. It was inspiring, though.
It's those moments of resilience, they really stick with you. And it's interesting how, even if you're not a fan of that particular sport, those personal stories, they just grab you.
Yeah.
It's that raw emotion, that drama. It's something we can all connect to.
For sure. So we've talked about our favorite sports, our favorite players, those memorable moments.
What's next?
How do we take these conversations even further?
Yeah, how do we make them even more interesting?
By diving into comparisons.
Oh, I love a good comparison.
Me too. This is where you can really express your opinions and spark some interesting debate.
Yeah, you start to get into those nuanced details.
Right. By comparing different sports or even different athletes. And this is where using comparatives and superlatives comes in.
Right, because now you're not just saying what you like, you're actually explaining why.
Exactly. You're highlighting the differences and similarities.
And that can lead to some fun back and forth.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So when you're comparing two things, that's the comparative form, you might say, I think basketball is more fast-paced than baseball. Or I think Messi is a more creative player than Ronaldo.
Right.
Or swimming is way more physically demanding than golf.
Yeah, you're pointing out those key differences.
Exactly. And then you've got superlatives, which is when you're talking about something being the best, the worst, the most, or the least.
Right. Those extremes.
So you might say, in my country, soccer is by far the most popular sport. Or a lot of people think Serena Williams is the greatest female tennis player ever. Or figure skating is the most technically difficult sport.
That's like the ultimate statement.
It is, and the examples in the material show how to use these naturally in conversation. So, when comparing sports, you could say, I enjoy both soccer and hockey, but I think soccer is more exciting overall because there's more continuous action. However, hockey can be the most thrilling when there's a sudden breakaway.
You're explaining the why behind your preference.
Exactly. And when comparing players, you could say, while Cristiano Ronaldo might be physically stronger, I think Messi's dribbling skills are just superior.
Yeah.
So for me, that makes Messi the better player.
You're acknowledging their strengths, but still stating your opinion.
Exactly. And the fun thing about comparisons is they're often subjective.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong answer.
Totally.
So it can lead to these really interesting and friendly debates.
It's all in good fun.
It is. But while we're busy sharing our own opinions, how do we make sure we're not just dominating the conversation?
Right. We don't want to just talk at people. It's about having an exchange.
Exactly. A good conversation is a two-way street.
Yeah, it's about listening to other people and getting their perspectives as well.
And for that, asking engaging questions is crucial.
Yeah. So you could ask, what are your thoughts on Erling Haaland? Or who would you say is your all-time favorite player?
Right.
Or, to broaden it out, which sport is the most exciting to watch, in your opinion?
Yeah.
And to bring it into the present, you could ask, have you seen any really memorable games recently?
These questions really show that you're genuinely curious about what the other person thinks. It keeps the conversation flowing. And they have a really good example dialogue here to illustrate this.
Okay.
Imagine you say, I think basketball is the most exciting team sport. What do you think? And your friend says, that's interesting. I actually find rugby to be more thrilling because of the physicality.
Okay.
And you follow up with, oh, rugby, who are some of your favorite players? And they say, I'm a huge fan of Siya Kolisi. His leadership is amazing. And then you can say, ah, yes, he's fantastic. Have you seen any of the recent international matches? See how that flows so naturally?
Yeah, it's like a chain reaction.
It is. It starts with a simple invitation to share an opinion. And it leads to all these new areas of conversation, and sometimes you even discover these unexpected shared interests.
Yeah, exactly. It's that back and forth, that genuine curiosity about each other's perspective that makes conversations so enjoyable. But what happens when those different perspectives lead to disagreements?
Ah, yes. Because those are bound to happen.
Yeah, clash of opinions.
But that's normal. And to be honest, it can be part of what makes sports conversations so fun.
Totally. The key is to handle those disagreements respectfully.
Exactly. At the end of the day, it's usually just a difference of opinion, right?
Yeah, about a game or a player.
It doesn't have to turn into a full-blown argument.
Right. The material actually gives some helpful phrases for politely disagreeing.
Oh, good.
You could say, I see your point, but I tend to think. Or, that's an interesting perspective, but I actually prefer.
Right.
Or, I can understand why you like them, even though I don't agree. And then there's the more gentle, maybe, but for me.
So those phrases, they allow you to express your own opinion without dismissing the other person's view.
Exactly.
It keeps things respectful.
And they give a good example here for a disagreement scenario.
Okay.
Your friend says, Ronaldo is a way better goal scorer than Messi.
Okay. Classic debate.
Right. And you could say, I see your point about Ronaldo's finishing, but I think Messi's overall playmaking makes him a more complete player. What do you think about their influence on their respective teams?
Ah, clever.
Right.
You acknowledge their point, state your own, and then redirect to another aspect.
Yeah, so you're not getting stuck in a debate.
Exactly. It keeps the conversation moving forward. So, wow, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We talked about how to start those conversations, how to discuss your favorite sports and players, how to share those memorable moments, how to make comparisons, how to invite others to share their thoughts, and even how to handle disagreements gracefully.
And all along the way, we've highlighted some really useful vocabulary and grammar points.
It's been a packed deep dive.
It has.
Yeah.
And to really help you solidify that learning, the sources put together a concise vocabulary list specifically for sports conversations.
Oh, that's handy.
Yeah, it's broken down into categories.
Okay, I like that.
So first we have general sports terms.
Right.
Things like goal, pass, defense, offense, and coach.
The basics.
Yeah, and each term has a little explanation to clarify its meaning.
Makes sense.
Then there are words for emotions like exciting, nervous, proud, and disappointed.
Because sports are definitely an emotional roller coaster.
They are.
Yeah.
And finally, there's a category for player qualities. So these are adjectives you can use to describe athletes.
Okay.
Like fast, strong, skillful, and smart.
So it's not just physical, but mental too.
Right, it's the whole package. And what's great about this list is that it shows you how you would use these words in a natural sports conversation.
It gives you that context, which is really helpful.
Yeah, and they also include practice conversations, which I think is the perfect next step for you, our listener.
Definitely, because practice is key.
Yeah. Try those dialogues out, read them aloud, practice with a friend.
It's all about getting comfortable with the language.
Exactly. And then they offer some really valuable tips for English learners.
Oh, I love tips.
Me too.
Let's hear them.
The first one is start simple.
Okay.
Don't feel like you have to use super complex language right away.
That's good advice for anything.
Right. Just ease into it.
Mm.
Then practice listening.
Mhm.
Listen to sports commentary, interviews, anything you can find in English.
Yeah. Immerse yourself in the language.
Learn idioms.
Ah, yes.
So those are like those informal expressions.
Like kickoff for the start of a game or a whole new ball game when something big changes.
Exactly. I love those. Me too. Okay. Repeat and imitate.
Mm-hmm.
So pay attention to how native speakers talk about sports and try to mimic their pronunciation and intonation.
Yeah, it's like shadowing.
It is. And then finally, and this is a really important one, don't worry about mistakes.
Oh, true.
Everyone makes
It's how we learn.
It's part of the process.
Exactly.
So thinking about everything we talked about today, what's one sports-related word or phrase that you now feel more confident using? That's something to think about and maybe look for an opportunity to use it in your next conversation.
It's about taking that knowledge and putting it into action.
Yeah, connecting with people through that universal language of sports.
Beautifully said.
Thanks.
You're welcome.